Good morning, everyone, and welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee with AmericanScouser.com. I would say or tea, but not tea yet. I do have Trevor with me tomorrow, so we'll see if he's a tea guy or a coffee guy. So stay tuned for that. Another thing to stay tuned for, we talked about this on the podcast yesterday. Actually, we were about to start a GoFundMe for Gally to get a console to join us, but we are starting our FIFA 23 league. So kind of like taking applications, getting people in Discord channel, starting the conversations now to see A, how many people we have, B, what kind of league format everybody would prefer and all that kind of stuff. Matusz, the Polish prince, is actually taking the lead on this for us in terms of setting it up. So yep, head on to the Discord channel. Just send us a message to this video on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll send you a link to hop on. Actually, I might just throw this on the YouTube channel's description portion as well. Let's get to the headlines. A couple of them this morning, but some that actually I would love to get people's takes on because I think it's kind of like an interesting ordeal in terms of which way this goes. We had I don't know if you guys caught the podcast last night. Alan is with us as always. Good morning, Alan. If you guys got the podcast last night, had quite an interesting conversation with Gally and Mecca, who was sitting in for Bickler, in terms of comparing the sports in here in the US compared there. The money in sports and some of those things came about as well. And I think this whole League Cup conversation really goes to that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The biggest news, I think, for us, for Liverpool, is the fact that Henderson is back in action. I don't know if I like seeing the fact that he's added to the England squad for the Nations League, which this Nations League thing is such a joke, but it is what it is. Maybe because especially Turkey is in this Group C now where they just not even playing with other. I don't know who they're playing with. It's just if it looks too easy for Turkey, there's usually a problem. But so Jordan Anderson is back. That's a huge boost. I know Hendo has not been himself, and I almost think this is kind of like an ordeal where he is going to be back where he can at least at the national team. I don't know how many minutes he'll get and he'll play. I think he's there more as one of the leaders of the team, and he will be there for the World Cup if he's healthy. So it's more, I think, about that than anything else. At least I hope he doesn't get a lot, maybe some 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the end of games or something like that. But definitely do not want him out there because definitely we need him out there for Liverpool. I think he's a huge part of protecting Trent. In terms of Trent's positioning, do not think. I know I was actually reading this morning on a Facebook post a lot of comments about Trent to midfield and all that kind of crap again. And one thing is with Trent's defending, when you're criticizing Trent's defending, you got to understand what you're criticizing. If you're criticizing his position, then you're not kind of understanding how we're playing in terms of where he's Trent should be there. Well, that's not how we're playing. But if what I criticize with Trent is when he is back defending, when he is in defense, the defending there. I think the other stuff Henderson's presence will help that because I think that's what we're kind of missing with Elliott. Yes, you're getting a bit more maybe creativity, pace, agility when we're attacking, but in terms of defensive issues, I think you're kind of missing a lot from what Hendo brings. Even though Hendo has not been his best, he's not been the player he was, let's say 2 years ago. And then, the years before then in terms of the energy he brings and stuff like that. But while Hendo doesn't bring that, taking people on and, dribbling and all that kind of stuff as much as Elliott would, he does move the ball a lot faster, which I think helps the offense more in some ways. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it's a huge addition to have back. So I was pretty excited to see that. I'm a huge fan of Hendo. I've been his kind of defender all these years. But going back to Trent, speaking of defending, going back to Trent, I think the issue I have with Trent is when he's back already defending and his defending he does there and his lack of hustle when defending. I think on one, he's a good defender, but in terms of covering the run afterwards in a give and go, or sometimes tracking back and really pushing the issue is that's where it gets kind of dicey. And I talked about this on in this show, on the podcast before, in post matches before. I mean, go back, look at the goal we conceded against United, look at the goal we conceded, two of the goals we conceded against Napoli, and the one against Ajax, where Trent, if he is going full speed, he can make an impact and stop those. In all of those, he is not initially. By the time he wakes up and realizes, hey, if I never slow down, I could have helped the situation, it's too freaking late, because by then he can't help the situation. So that's the criticism I have with Trent when it comes to defending. But Hendo's presence helps automatically in terms of the positional defending part. So it would be huge to have him back. A couple of headlines coming through from Alan, as always, here. I did see this. Diallo Googled how to break a kneecap. Danger. It's, I don't know why. I mean, on this, maybe he doesn't like Neymar like I do. But yeah, it's kind of a weird ordeal, right, for a player to like search that and be like, go after it. And then the Ukraine manager Petrakov is fined and given a warning by for discriminating against Russia by wanting to shoot invading soldiers after the Russian FA complained. I did not see this news, to be honest with you. I don't know what to make of that. I just feel there's such cynical approach to all this stuff when it comes to sports. There are wars and fighting and people dying we never freaking hear of. For some reason, apparently they're not as important. I found out, actually, and this is how bad. I mean, and I think, I think if you're from Europe, I think you can kind of maybe relate to this more. And unless things have changed over there as well. But growing up, I felt like I knew a lot more about what was going on in the world. In the US, you're more of like in your bubble, if you will. And so you only hear about things that are kind of like fed to you by like the regular media, because they don't really pay attention to a lot of international news. So I actually found out there was fighting in Armenia and Azerbaijan when I was watching a soccer game, and the commentator was talking about it because a team from Azerbaijan was playing in it in the Europa, I believe it was. So there's a lot of stuff, but nothing happens with that. All the focus is on one. I know, I just kind of hate that cynical stuff, and I wish they found a way to keep it out. I know it's impossible when something like this happens, but it's just weird. I know, like when when Fenerbahce played Dynamo Kiev, they had all kinds of issues then, and I know like Turkish fans did some stuff, Ukraine fans did some stuff. It's just, I think it becomes an out for people who are especially going through something even more challenging and difficult, like war or like politics and stuff like that. And I hate it when soccer is used as an out, not out as in a day away from that misery, maybe to take your mind away, but more to take your aggression and frustration out. I think that's a fine line to cross there. But so here's the one I really wanted to kind of like dig into this morning and talk about. So let me pull up this news over here. There's like meetings going on right now in terms of League Cup and the FA Cup. And, this has been like proposed for quite some time. And now they're kind of like, nothing is going to be official, I think. But I think it's one of those deals where they are going to make it more and more prevalent. And this is where the money comes in, people. Okay, so some of the proposals are clubs in Champions League and Europa League, or the Europa Conference League, which I think we can debate which one is a better tournament, the Europa Conference League or the League Cup, but could either pull out of the tournament completely or send under 21 sides instead to these tournaments, so the FA Cup and League Cup. Especially the League Cup, I think, is the one they're focusing on, because we know FA has pretty much admitted to League Cup being not that important when they told Liverpool to play two games at the same time and basically said, I don't know, man, it doesn't really matter. Put out there who you can. So we put out our kids there. Was that a Villa game? Was it West Ham? I can't remember. I mean, they got killed, but I mean, it was just like kids, literally boys against men kind of a deal, because we had taken some of the better younger players with us to Brazil, I think, at the time when we were playing the whatever that thing is called, World Club World Cup or whatever it is. Um, so the League Cup, I know they're going to the FA Cup replays, which obviously will help scheduling. But this whole League Cup thing is what kind of like is odd to me because it's talking about it's an important money spinner for clubs in the lower leagues, which has led to a compromise approach over the future of the tournament rather than attempting to scrap it completely. So I understand the lower league teams need these games for gate money or whatever it is, but I don't know anyone basically maybe who's more into or maybe follows smaller clubs back in England can kind of like talk to this, but isn't the main attraction for them is playing some of these big boys and some of the Premier League teams where they can kind of get more fans, can get their away fans into their stadium and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, is that going to help them financially, or even like these lower league teams, even if them playing each other, it's basically one extra game that can get gates from. Um, I just don't know how much of an impact that's doing, but I guess when you have so many games, it's the only way to go. Ellen says, I've been saying for a decade now that clubs in European competitions should drop out of the Carabao Cup, help towards European success. Carabao Cup is peanuts in terms of big bucks to the winner. And I think that's the thing. The League Cup, and I think this is in most leagues. I don't know how like the German Cup is, but I know it's like that in Turkey. I know it's like that in Italy. It's more like the local the domestic cup, not local, but the domestic cups are more of like a nuisance than anything else. And financially, in most cases, clubs actually almost lose money because of the wages and stuff like that. They have to pay players, or the bonuses they have to pay players. If you look at the grand scheme of things, some of these domestic cups actually cost teams stuff, and like the big teams, I should say, and they are there more for the smaller clubs to get some money, whether it's like gates or, like I say, like playing with bigger teams, going to their stadium, getting a portion of that or whatever it might be. But it's always been catered to. I shouldn't say catered to, but has been there in with those teams in mind and their income and all that kind of stuff. So I guess the question becomes, when you take all these teams out, the guys that are in, the Conference League, the Europa League, the Champions League, is the League Cup still a viable competition for the rest? Is it going to get even less attention now, which means even less money it generates? That would be interesting to see moving forward, because I mean, obviously, as Liverpool fans, if Liverpool's not in it, we're probably not going to watch it unless it's the only thing on TV at the time, which more than likely they are going to be playing it on days where there are like European tournaments and stuff like that. I know they can't overlap and stuff because of TV rights and all that kind of stuff that they do with the Champions League, but they could do it in the morning, whatever the case is, or they can do it on a Tuesday or whatever. But I just wonder like how much viable it's going to be financially for those teams if all these top teams are taken out. I mean, you're pretty much taken out almost like the top half of the Premier League out of the tournament. It will give some of these other teams maybe a bigger shot at winning it, especially the rest of the Premier League teams. So I guess the flip side would be a team like let's see. I was gonna say Leicester, but let's not do a Rogers bashing so soon. But I don't know, something like a mid-table team. Let's say like as of now, maybe like a Southampton or heck like a Bournemouth or somebody like that. Are they going to be like, hey man, we got a shot at winning this, and go for it? And is it even worth it? Because especially teams like that who could possibly have a danger of relegation battle and their focus is staying in the Premier League, is it really worth going for when there's no financial rewards? And when you take those top teams out, I would think the financial reward that you get from sponsors is going to be even less now. So I know, I mean, this is not, a done deal. This is kind of like in the discussion stages, but I wonder how it will impact it, because I think it's going to take a lot of money out. That's not already there. I mean, already they're not getting a lot of money. It's peanuts, like Alan is saying. So taking even more money out, because I don't think sponsors are going to be big on that. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if it's going to happen. The replay thing, I think, will definitely happen for the FA Cup. But the League Cup, taking the European teams out, I expect more of like they can send their U21s and stuff, something along those lines instead, where you kind of get the best of both worlds, kind of. So there is still a Liverpool in there, a City in there, but not really. It's like the kids. But at the same time, it still gives somebody, let's say, an opportunity to come to Anfield where, tickets might be more reasonable. So they might still be able to fill the stadium because it is still Liverpool at the end of the day, or it's still, well, not City. City kind of fill the stadium in with their real team. But, teams who have fans, actual fans, like fill the stadium and still get some money for those clubs and keep those teams in, but not necessarily in. I feel like it will go more that direction as opposed to kind of like totally eliminating it. But it's going to be interesting to see which way they go with it. I think I more opt for, because I know they're never going to get rid of it, because I think it means that much to hence they're trying to come up with a way to keep it, but make the big boys happy at the same time. So they're never going to get rid of it for the sake of those smaller clubs. So they're trying to find a way where they can get money for those smaller clubs, keep the Carabao Cup, but realizing the big boys are going to be like, the hell with this. There's no way we can play this many games. Regardless of how deep these squads now, if you look back, if you're as old as I am, and you look back like even like a decade ago, the squads did not have to be this deep, and you did not have squads this deep. You basically looked at a team and you maybe had like 3-4 players off the bench that can come and make an impact, and you were happy. Now it's like, because even if you have 3-4 injuries, you gotta have that on your bench, or you're considered not a deep squad and stuff like that. So, which means obviously a lot of money for these top teams with the wages and stuff like that, to be able to absorb such a large squad at all times, to be able to compete on all fronts. Or you're going to do something like Klopp has done in the past, where flat out, we've shown that we really don't care. I know we're like, oh, every player is the same, blah blah blah, but we've put out mostly, sides with mostly backup players, or youth players and stuff like that, which I enjoy watching, but obviously it doesn't always bring success. And let's face it, we had a year where we went all in, right, like for everything, because we were gonna, had the chance of getting the quad, and in some ways we're paying the price of doing that, just going for it. So it's more like, now you look back and you're like, well, this is why Club didn't care about the League Cup, and didn't care if we went out early. We always, as fans, said, hey, we got to go deep, so it gives a guy like Taki chance to play, like Divock, blah blah blah. Ox, great opportunity for Ox, he was healthy, but it takes its toll, and I think we've seen that last season, or we're seeing it this season, after going through what we did last season with going into tournaments full blast. So that's going to be interesting to see what they come up with. Other news, actually, we kind of like briefly talked about this yesterday too, in terms of, well, the whole conversation was Chelsea owners suggesting things like the All-Star game, and thinking Mo and De Bruyne was from their youth team and things like that. And one of the things we talked about is that will still be a smart ownership group, that will go after the right people and pay the right people to be there to kind of like take them in the right direction. So they're talking to Freund, who is one of those guys that kind of is known for, finding talent, developing talents, finding young players that will develop into top players and stuff. So it would be interesting to see, though, is while Chelsea have spent a ton of money, when you get a guy like Freund, you're more looking at things similar to Liverpool and FSG in terms of like ownership, where you are going for younger, better talents, as opposed to kind of like splashing out big dollars to maybe like older guys, or guys who are already well known, unless they're trying to do like obviously in this off season they splash a lot of money, but that could be partially, hey, look at us, we're here just like Abramovich, we spend money, kind of an ordeal. But I think moving forward, it will be a smart move for them to get somebody like Freund in there who knows the sport. So I think I think Gally was the one talking about this on the podcast yesterday in terms of the Chelsea ownership, having seen what they've done with like Dodgers and stuff like that. I guess. Obviously, I'm not very familiar with baseball, but I'll take Galdi's word for it. He is what like a smart ownership group that knows how to get success by putting in the right people in those places to make those decisions and not intervening. I mean, obviously you don't want this guy, the owner, intervening when he thinks Mo and De Bruyne were from the youth team. Clearly doesn't understand the concept, and it's going to take some time. So it's smart to go pay whatever it takes to a guy who knows exactly what needs to be done and say, hey man, you know what you're doing, you take care of this. And the key then is will they let that person do their job, or are they going to intervene and say, hey, I saw it on ESPN this morning, this guy scored a goal, what do you think, we should get him, or something like that. So that's the interesting part. I think any owner that comes in always has that concept, right, where they say, I gotta, at least the big money, big business people understand that everybody has their strengths and they're going to do that. I mean, you look at, and I think the league and the fans and the clubs are built like that as well. This is something that actually we're talking with my brother on our podcast in Turkey, regarding how you see these owners, like you look at leagues in, let's say, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and stuff like that, and you always, I mean, just go to YouTube right now after this and Google it or whatever, and you'll see like, the owner storming the field and pulling their team, and all kinds of like drama they add in there, and they're very into the whole thing. Like they go to the locker room and give the pep talk, all kinds of shit, like all kinds of drama of making themselves important and stuff like that. But those people, when they buy clubs like City or club like Newcastle and stuff like that, they are smart enough, and I think the business and the league is built in a way where they can't do that. You're not gonna have the sheikh like run out to the field and pull Newcastle out and stuff like that, or chainsaw people in the locker room. You're gonna basically, they are smart enough. I think the league is built well enough to hire the right people. The second phase of that is letting those people do their job without, and having the patience to do their job, because it's not an overnight ordeal. So some owners can do that, some owners can't. And honestly, some owners probably do it to a fault, where they wait too long and never say, okay, I think we made a mistake with bringing the person in the first place. Because you could have made a mistake bringing the wrong guy in to build that club moving forward, your sporting chief or whatever they call them. So it's interesting to see how much patience has had, and let's see what happens with Chelsea when it comes to that. Same thing with Newcastle and stuff. Some of these new ownerships, they are going to start making the right moves, because when they take a team over, they spend a lot of money, bring a bunch of new guys in. You look at a team like Newcastle, there are like, there's money being spent, so automatically good players coming in. Yeah, but you can't keep bringing good players and hope that it's going to happen. And that's, not every club can do that. I mean, look at freaking United, how much money has been spent. Look at freaking Everton, how much money they've spent. It's not about just spending money, it's about spending the money right, or on the right guy in the correct way and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward, but and how much patience they have. We were talking about how more and more probably we're going to see American ownership moving in, a lot of money coming in, because I think everybody sees Premier League as, holy cow, there's a lot of money to be made in there. So if you haven't had a chance, definitely check out last night's podcast. I thought it was an interesting conversation of comparing the sports here to England or rest of Europe, to be honest, and what each can learn from the other side and what each can bring to the other side. There are some things that can't, like, you can't take the relegation promotion thing from England and bring it here, unfortunately, because it would really make sports a lot better here, but it's just not feasible the way the franchises are set up and all that kind of stuff. But there are some things I think each side can learn from the other one, so it'll be interesting to see what happens as we move forward. I think the biggest thing that in England and in Europe in general that fans have against American ownership is they look at some of the stuff here, and you, like, it can be cringy, like tanking and all that kind of stuff, like, tanking the season and draft picks and rewarding mediocrity, and everybody makes money and everybody's happy anyway, and there's no consequences for failure ultimately, really, for an owner. And like, thing like NFL, for example, I mean, you can suck year after year after year. You can, you know, squabble. I mean, you can just bring a new general manager, bring a new coach, rinse and repeat, and still rake in money. So for an ownership, there's really zero consequences because there is no relegation and stuff. So I think when England looks at the US, they're always, and in any American ownership, there's always that fear that this is what they want here. And I don't think it will ever happen, to be able to implement that. But I would be afraid of a lot of things that would be done to change the game to bring more money in. But I mean, we're already seeing this. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with like American ownership. As long as there's FIFA looking to make money, I mean, everybody went up in arms when teams said Super League, and FIFA was like, see, this is what they want. And, like, these big rich guys, they're so evil. And then, like 6 months later, they're like, hey, we have an idea. Why don't we switch the Champions League around, and basically made it on their own Super League in some ways. And I really feel as they kind of tweak that more and more, it's eventually going to be the Super League, but it will be in FIFA's terms, and FIFA will get their cut. And that was the main thing that, UFA and, FIFA were against in the first place. But when money is involved, sadly, sports kind of take a darker turn. So it's more about fans, I think, kind of being that voice, kind of like what they did with the Super League. But I think when, you know, maybe it's because when something happens with the Champions League, when FIFA, UFA like change something where it's almost Super League-ish, you don't get as big of a fan reaction because it does not affect everybody, or it doesn't initially look like everybody. So the dude who's a Bournemouth fan will be like, oh, it's nothing for us to worry about. Well, it is, because it does affect the entire spectrum in the long run. But I think those fans feel like it does not really affect them as much. So the initial reaction or the impact is not as much as you would have if it was, the Premier League doing something like that. So I just hope, like I say, this whole Champions League, we're going to see it with the new format here. But I mean, really, how is it that much different than the Super League? It only needs a few tweaks to bring it to the Super League format. And it's really bad for other clubs who, there's already a big gap of the top clubs and like the tier behind. And then obviously there's like a very lower tier. And I think this new format they're going to start is going to make that initial gap even bigger. And that's what they really want. That's what this top tier wants anyway. So they get their money, except now a portion of it does go to UFA and FIFA and fills those pockets too. And those guys love their pockets. That's why we have a freaking World Cup in the middle of winter. And that's why, when we were talking about this All-Star game yesterday, when people talk about, oh, when would they do it? There's no time and stuff. Trust me, when there's money involved, they will freaking find time. So it's up to the fans, I think, at times, kind of like working together to make sure some of these changes for money does not destroy the game in the long run, because that would be my biggest fear. Spoken like an old guy, but it is what it is. I think even we are seeing it, even if you're like in your early 20s, I think you should have probably seen the turn in sports over the last decade, because it has taken a huge turn. I think the social media, everything else has affected how the players approach the game, especially here in the US. The players themselves have become more of a brand in some ways than the clubs or franchises or whatever they play for. Look at Mbappe, for example. And I was just reading this morning, for example, one of the headlines. I don't know the full details, so I don't want to go into, but, he did not want to take part in some of the France national team sponsor stuff because, it contradicted with his own image and all his sponsors and stuff like that. So, I mean, the whole thing has changed. The whole sports scene is changing, and I think social media and stuff like that has helped players make themselves more of a brand. I mean, look at players like LeBron and stuff like that, and he's not we're not just looking. I mean, there was always like one guy, like there was MJ or Kobe or something like that. I mean, you have a bunch of these guys now at the same time pushing their own brand in the US, and now we're seeing it in soccer as well. For example, Ronaldo just beat Messi as Instagram's most powerful player whatever the hell that means. That was a headline from ESPN this morning. But sadly, that shit matters, and I think that makes the players bigger than the club. So as for an old fart like me, that is not nice to see, because I don't care who wears the jersey. I'm going to root for that team because I'm rooting for the club, not specifically the player. Obviously, we learn and love the players and then that play for our team, but ultimately it's the team. And we always say, right? No players bigger than the club, no players bigger than the team, and stuff like that. Well, that's starting to change, sadly, as we move along over here. Let's hope soccer, as much as possible, stays away from that, and that, I think, is a lot on the fans. So for the young kids out there, stop looking at Instagram. Or you just see like this whole Ronaldo beats Messi in the Instagram thing. I mean, any Instagram or Facebook post that involves any of those guys, you see the comments in there where people just follow just the player. I don't think I've ever followed a player ever. Here, back home, never. If he was wearing my team's jersey, yes. The moment he's gone, I might not wish ill on him or whatever based on how they left, but I'm not gonna follow them. I'm not gonna like freaking like post every freaking thing, like, and chase him around and stuff like that, because I'm more of a fan of the club as opposed to the specific people in there, because they wear the badge. I root for the badge, not specifically like the players themselves. They happen to be wearing the badge. I hope I'm explaining that right. But I think that's changing in sports slowly but surely, sadly, I should say. So let's hope soccer stays away from that as much as possible, and this whole commercial aspect of it. Well, there's a dark picture for you on a Tuesday morning for the future of sports. At least for me, I think maybe some people do enjoy that. So we'd love to hear your guys' take on it. Throw in the comments below. Do you guys see that happening more and more? Sadly, I do. Maybe I'm just an old farts, more like a traditionalist kind of a dude. But yeah, it's definitely not going in the right direction from the way I look at it, in terms of how much more power the players have over the clubs, as more than, and I'm not talking about contract negotiations or some of the stuff that NFL pulls over there and all that kind of stuff. I'm more talking about fans following individuals that we see here in the US a lot more, and we did not see as much, I think, in Europe in soccer before. And will it go the same way? And I think Mbappe is like a brutal example of that. So we'd love to get your guys' take. Tomorrow, I will have somebody else in the other chair. We're having Trevor over here making his first appearance on American Scouser TV. He's from the Rhode Island area, a galley recruit. Galley drugged him apparently at one point, and now he's with us. So you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you guys here tomorrow morning. Take care.